This video is going to be dedicated to all the major finds found during the Sulphur River trip I took the last 2 weeks. Now, if you haven't seen the first 2 videos that I posted on the Sulphur River trip that I took, I suggest you go watch those first 2 videos now. Or if you just don't care about the order that you see these videos in, or if you just have already seen those videos and you want to watch this one now, I guess you can keep going. So the way this is going to go is like this. We're going to start down here with the lower part of the tray that I have set out, and we're just going to work our way up throughout all of that, and we're just going to look at those 2 big pieces last. So to start out with, we're going to look at these humulus squamous tube worms that we found during the Sulphur River trip. We found a lot of them in the sifter, but also a lot of them were from just surface collecting. We found a total of 11 during the whole trip. So, moving on from the tube worms, we're going to go on to the teeth, which are probably the more exciting part of the video, and I know it was the most exciting part of my trip. So let's start off with the sawfish blade here. We have a sawfish blade here that I found the 3rd day. I didn't get a recording of it, sadly. But then we have 2 squalicorax teeth. These were both removed just from the layer. They're eroding out. I left that one in the matrix, or the surrounding rock. So I thought it was a good piece, a good display piece. Then we have just a random shark blade. I don't know what kind of shark it would be from. Then there's, I believe the words mammal tooth enamel, I think. Like the inside of the tooth. It's an Ice Age animal tooth, or part of one. And then we have a Zephactinus fish tooth, or some people call it X-fish, right there. That's the Zephactinus, or X-fish is what some people call it. And then my hair one is the part of a mosasaur tooth. This is the root, not the actual tooth itself, but this is my first mosasaur tooth, so I was pretty psyched when I saw that. And then I know this is not a tooth, but this is a part of a shark vertebrae that we found. So I thought that was pretty cool too, so I put that out here. Now moving on from the teeth, we were going to move on to the tons of orthocyrus pieces that we picked up. This isn't even half of them, this is about 1/4 of the orthocyrus pieces that we got. And they're all in this big line here that you're seeing, this big black line of just orthocyrus pieces that we picked up. And this is only about 1/4 of what we picked up. The rest of them are in the garage, still being cleaned up. But we got enough to fill several toolboxes full. And then we have all these snails that were cool that we got. We got 2 smaller snails, and then they progressively got bigger until this really nice one that we got is the biggest one we have. We found that in the actual riverbed itself. This is part of an ammonite that we pulled out of the river in Ladonia, which is where we were at, the Ladonia Fossil Park. That's where most of the stuff came from. Even that mosasaur tooth came from the Ladonia Park, but this is one that we actually pulled out of the actual riverbed. I'm going to clean that up with the air scribe. And then my dad actually found a cool little ammonite that came out of the red zone from Ladonia. Kind of cool. Now there are some mosasaurs that ate the ammonites that got 10 times this size, and they just crunch these up, so it's kind of cool seeing that little tiny thing. And imagine that thing kind of swimming around in the Cretaceous oceans when the 45-foot mosasaur swims by it. And then also from the red zone, my dad found a cool little clam or oyster that we found. And then there's my arrowhead that I found after dropping all my stuff out of the toolbox. I was picking it all up, and lo and behold, there's the arrowhead. So that was a really cool find. That's my first arrowhead ever, so I was really happy about that one. Now, off the topic of actual fossils, wait a minute, camera's shaking too much. Damn it, stop shaking, James. Jesus. Now, off the topic of actual fossils, we are going to look at these cool sulphur crystals that we picked up at the river too. I guess some people go down to this river just to pick up these crystals, and they make lots of jewelry out of them. But we found lots of these crystals, and these are just the 4 chunks that we brought back. We also saw a lot of these around. This is a very small one, but there are lots of little shells out there. But we saw lots of these out there. Now moving on to the bone, which is probably the second most exciting part of the trip. So I'm just going to do a quick pan around of all the bone that I found, and I'll describe anything that stands out. We think that's part of a joint to a flipper. That's part of a vertebrae that's been tumbled in the river. I know for a fact that's bone, but I think it's a faceplate of X-fish, or sphagnus, however you want to call it. There's another vertebrae. That's a vertebrae that Dad found. It's actually pretty nice. There's another piece of bone, probably a tumbled vertebrae. This is the vertebrae I found. I like this one. You can see where the spinal cord went. And there's just another big chunk of tumbled bone. Now finally, to wrap this up, I'm going to just briefly talk about these big shells that were here. We found these shells almost everywhere. They're just massive shells. I mean, this thing is bigger than my hand. It's actually probably as big as my head, too. And that's one of the bigger ones that we found. I picked this up the first day. There's just two smaller ones in this rock. I just thought it was a nice piece. I'll work on that one bit with the air scribe and try to uncover this one a little bit more, because it goes down into this rock. But I thought it was just a nice piece.